Global Airlines, the UK's new startup intent on operating with only the world's biggest passenger plane, made history at the beginning of May when it touched down at Prestwick Airport in Scotland. For Prestwick Airport, it was the first time it had ever seen the arrival of an Airbus A380. It also cemented Global's position as only the second company to operate a second-hand A380. But there's another reason the transatlantic flight was special. Could it have been the longest gear-down ferry flight ever seen with an Airbus A380? Let's discuss this in detail for today's video. From the airline's unconventional concept to the latest progress in acquiring A380s, there's a lot to learn about Global Airlines. But why was the gear down for a ferry flight over the Atlantic? On the day of the flight, speculation was rife that the entire trip had been conducted with the aircraft's landing gear down. This was backed up by the fact that the aircraft flew at a lower altitude and slower speed than we would normally see when an A380 crosses the Atlantic. Shortly after the completion of the flight, the gear-down configuration was confirmed by Wheatley Specialist Hi-Fly, the company that had the honour of getting this big bird to the UK from its desert storage location. In a statement released by the company, it said, "The flights were operated with a gear down ahead of the required maintenance, thus slower and at lower altitude, and the need for a fuel stop." The fuel stop was made in Mirabel, Montreal, following a 5-hour, 40-minute flight from Mojave covering around 2,150 nautical miles. After overnighting at Mirabel, the A380 continued on its journey, completing the 2,800 nautical mile to Prestwick in 7 hours and 44 minutes. The aircraft had a cruising altitude of flight level 270. But what else do we know about the reasons for flying with the gear down? Hi-Fly shed some light on this too, telling the media, "Hi-Fly teams worked closely with Airbus and Global Airlines to understand which flight conditions would apply. The fact that jacks were not available in the Mojave Desert Airport meant that the Global Airlines A380-841 9 Hotel Golf Lima Oscar Bravo Lima had to be ferried to Prestwick, where it will undergo further maintenance before returning to the skies." The lack of jacks alluded to in the statement is on the surface unsurprising, given that no US airline ever operated the A380, and none to date have been all that interested in pulling one out of storage. At the same time, Qantas stored its A380s in Victorville over the pandemic and didn't fly transoceanic with its gear down. Certainly, there is a facility in the area which might have had the appropriate equipment. Speaking with the Sydney Morning Herald about reactivating his airline's A380s, Qantas CEO at the time, Alan Joyce, stated, "They jack the aircraft up in the middle of the desert where all of its gear is tested, meaning aircraft's engines are running around in the desert for months to make sure that it's functioning. All that work is just to get out of the desert to Los Angeles or to another maintenance facility." Nonetheless, we trust that Hi-Fly and Global Airlines must have done their research and calculated that a lower and slower flight to Prestwick was the better option. Airbus's guidance on returning parked aircraft to operations has this to say in terms of landing gear. For aircraft in parking beyond 4 months, landing gear retraction/extension and freefall extension or REFF tests have to be performed. 2 options are generally available and have to be covered by Repair and Design Approval Form or RDAF. To jack the aircraft and perform the tests at the storage site, or to perform a ferry flight with the landing gear down and locked as per supplementary procedure of the FCOM flight with gear down to another site where jacking is possible. Known as a gear swing test, this is an essential part of returning a jet to operations following time in storage. To conduct the test, the aircraft must be lifted off the ground using giant hydraulic jacks. These jacks are positioned under the nose of the plane, under the tail, and one under each wing. Engineers must ensure the aircraft is perfectly balanced, as any unsteadiness could have expensive and embarrassing consequences. Sometimes even the fuel will be moved around between the tanks to ensure a perfect balance. Once it's securely positioned, the engineers will extend and retract the landing gear several times. A lever on the flight deck is moved, which sets off a computer-controlled sequence to open the huge gear doors and lower the 7-ton landing gear into place. After checking that the gear is fully operational and making any necessary adjustments, the gear swing test is complete. Going back to the global Airlines A380, could this have been the longest A380 gear-down ferry flight? With no jacks available in Mojave to hoist the giant aircraft off the ground, the high-fly team had no choice but to fly the A380 with its landing gear down. These sorts of flights are not that unusual. Indeed, when Lufthansa brought its A380 back from storage in Teruel, it flew to Frankfurt with its gear down too, for the same reason, a lack of suitable jacks. But central Spain to Frankfurt isn't exactly a transatlantic crossing. It's almost impossible to verify, unfortunately, but we'd bet our last dollar this global flight to Prestwick was the longest an A380 has intentionally been flown with its gear down, a testament to the skills of the high-fly pilots. Captaining the flight was Commander Carlos Mirpuri, who said of the trip, "This was a long flight across America and the Atlantic Ocean, with an A380 configured much differently from those in commercial operations, including its landing gears locked down, but all went as expected. I wish Global Airlines success with it and look forward to flying it again." In September 2023, Global Airlines and Hi-Fly signed an agreement to work together on the development and maintenance of 4 A380 aircraft the new airline has agreed to acquire. Hi-Fly was the first to operate the A380 in the secondary market, and so Global Airlines is relying on the firm to use their extensive experience of the aircraft to prepare it for service. In its media statement on its Hi-Fly partnership, Global Airlines stated, "The short-term focus for both organizations are the EIS and return to service or RTS processes for Global's first aircraft, expected to commence in the months ahead. However, both companies will explore further ways to broaden their collaboration, united by a passion for the aircraft and a shared belief in its enduring potential and appeal." Getting to this point in the Global Airlines story represents around 4,000 work hours. Now that it's in Prestwick, it can get its gear swing test done and all the other maintenance required before it fully returns to service. Hi-Fly mentioned that this includes a C-check, interior renovations, and upgrades. At the time of this video's production, the jet has been at Prestwick for a little over 2 weeks. Did you follow the A380 flight from Montreal to Prestwick? Were you surprised that it flew with the landing gear down? Leave a comment and let us know. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.